Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's going to try to figure out what does James Blake mean with his new album titled Playing Robots into Heaven. Before I get to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about my relationship with an artist before I go into the review. I missed the boat. I missed the boat on James Blake back in the day. I wasn't paying attention to music between around 2002 until 2018. So my first experience was with Friends Who Break Your Heart from 2019. And so basically I'm like sort of like an explorer. You know, I'm trying to do research into James Blake and who is he. If you saw my last review, you know the first thing I needed to understand is that he's not the same person as James Blunt. They both have beautiful voices, but he's not James Blunt. But the thing I've really come to understand by listening to this album multiple times is that James Blake is an artist with a capital A. By that I mean he's an artist who follows his own vision from project to project. He's an artist who does what he wants, and that what that is sometimes is in defiance of what some of his audience wants. It could even be in defiance of what most of his audience wants. But one thing that's clear just from maybe the 3 or 4 projects of his I've now listened to is he is doing what he needs to do as an artist. He is following some kind of vision, and that's the vision that he's sharing. And it ends up with artists like that. These are my favorite artists. The artists formerly known as Kanye, Daft Punk, the Beatles. You know, they move and they shift and they change. Neil Young. And your first initial take is like, oh, geez, I wish they just kept doing the thing they did last time because that's the thing that I liked. But what ends up happening is the more you listen, the more you like it. The more you listen, the more you get it. With a great artist, an artist with a capital A, you end up really seeing that it wasn't actually the genre or the specific kind of feeling that the artist was giving you at a certain point. It wasn't that was drawing you in. It was the artist themselves. So when I bought Friends Who Break Your Heart, I bought it on CD. Pretty rare. I usually buy things on vinyl these days, like a proper middle-aged hipster. But I bought it on CD because my wife liked it so much. And she had a car with a CD player, and so I got her the CD, and it came autographed. So already I'm in the James Blake fan club. I don't know how I ended up with an autographed CD. I would show it to you, but there's going to be some changes to Professor Skye's studio here. There's going to be some changes. Might end up losing the banana behind me. So I can't find my CDs. They're kind of all over the place. But I was able to find this because it's still in her car. And then I went back to the Record Archive in Rochester, New York. They don't sponsor me, but it's my favorite store in the world. And I bought her this, James Blake's first album. I don't like it. It's not a lot like Friends Who Break Your Heart. Is it the guy who did the Kendrick album? My response was the response listening to the old James Blake was that response of just sort of like, I like the stuff that I like. And that's the problem is too often we don't give artists faith that they are artists, that they're taking us somewhere we didn't know we want to go, but we want to be there. So one thing that listening to James Blake's most recent album has told me is that I must, at all costs, give more time to this album. I'm sure. And you can call me a dunderheaded ninny-muggins if you want in the comments. Everybody, call me a dunderheaded ninny-muggins. You're probably right, because I bet this album is a frickin' masterpiece. But the first time I listened to it, I don't know, it's not enough to it. I want to do more, you know? Stupid TV, be more funny. Stupid electronic music producer, give me more bops. Give me a little bit of waka waka, you know? And the reason that I understand this is going to change is that when I listened to this new album, Playing Robots into Heaven, the first time I listened, I was like, yeah, that's fine. It's cool. It's not bad, you know? I didn't listen to this and think this is bad. I just thought, I am not going to connect to it. But then I listened to it again. Then I listened to Playing Robots into Heaven again. And again. And then this morning, oh my God, I listened to it on headphones. All these textures come out, and now I'm thinking that last album that I listened to was fine, but it was kind of juvenilia compared to this amazing new album that he produced. And that's what a real artist can do. Now you'll notice that the title of this review is goofy as hell. All my homies love James Blake, and I'm doing that partly in homage to a music YouTuber whose content should be as ubiquitous as, I don't know, Anthony Fantano or Mike the Snare or PewDiePie. Like, he is such a good YouTuber, and he has taught me so much about James Blake. He's taught me more than that. He's taught me about dubstep and so many things about electronic music. So he's called Timba on Toast. I've referenced him before in my Skrillex video because he made a video called All My Homies Hate Skrillex, where he explains what happened to dubstep. And what's fascinating is the problem with dubstep is me. Like, I heard Skrillex in 2013 as a middle-aged who's-he what's it. It was the first piece of new music I heard in a long time that blew my mind. I immediately went to the record archive and bought the stupid EP because all I wanted to do was hear the drop and the waka 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 waka. So here's this Timba on Toast video that explains that really that instinct, while understandable and frankly paying homage to the only rule of DJing, which is follow the crowd. That's not a rule of artists, but that's the rule of DJing, follow the crowd, that had killed what was dubstep. And apparently, I was surprised to find out, this guy, this guy, his name isn't like, Cyrex Impasta. His name isn't like, Couch Stripe Villain. It's none of those things. You can use those names, by the way, for your own bands. It's just a guy. It's a guy who I thought was James Blunt. And so I watched this whole video. It's great. I've watched it actually multiple times. I really suggest you watch it. And then he released, at some point after that, another video where he explains why James Blake was the GOAT of dubstep. I go into all this detail because I am going to use, or try to use, some of Timba on Toast's general framing or explanation of what makes James Blake so great. I'm not an expert on electronic music, okay? I'm a dilettante. So, like when I did this video, I put up a poll on my channel that said, which electronic album do you want me to review, Chemical Brothers or James Blake? 80% of you voted for James Blake. You're the homies. You're all my homies who love James Blake. And it's pretty interesting because, like, the Chemical Brothers album's way easier to approach. It's a lot easier to say a lot more about it. I mean, it's an amazing album. I can't wait to review it. I am going to get to it. But the thing that Timba on Toast helps me to understand is that James Blake is, like, really avant-garde. He was really ahead of his time. That before that bro step takeover, when the Waka Wakas took over everything, or even during that takeover, James Blake represented this other kind of strange ideal. Even before then, Timba Toast explains how there's all these ragamuffin vocal flips, which you hear all the time, and of course Kanye took and used a lot as well. And so in that review, he goes into a description of the first song he ever heard, Air and the Lack Thereof, and just describes it. And what is so great is that he's describing this first song he ever heard by James Blake, and it applies to everything that I'm reviewing on this new album, Playing Robots into Heaven. Talking about kind of this sparse production, about like a great mix with a little bit too much reverb, but a great real sense of melody and harmony and instrumentation, especially harmonized organ sounds. The term he kept on using was wonky, and that's what's so great about James Blake, is so many of his beats are just super wonky, but as he said, he's younger than me, so he can use this word, also a bop. So things that are wonky and a bop, that's like the James Blake wheelhouse. And then he kept on referring to rug pulls, which is where you're expecting something to happen and then it doesn't. And he goes even further. It's like an hour and 45-minute video. It's spectacular. Seriously, stop watching this and watch that if you haven't watched it. It's not just better content than this. You will learn a lot from it. But there's this like rug pull, which is the idea of where you're expecting something to happen. Usually in electronic music, you expect a drop. But he doesn't always give you the drop. He is an artist of restraint. And maybe that project, the Only Friends Can Break Your Heart, maybe that was like a move away from this restraint. Because that album was filled with restraint, but also it was pretty mainstream. It was pretty easy for me to jump on board as someone who loves soul music and electronic music and And this album is a little bit more challenging. Again, a little more challenging in the vein of his first album. I was fascinated to hear that he doesn't base his beats on drums. Most electronic dance producers just start the drums and then build on top. And that's part of what ends up happening with James Blake is the drums don't have an inevitable feeling. It doesn't feel like you know what's going to happen song to song. It feels like things might change. He might pull the rug out from under you. So he's just subtle. But he's subtle in a field that you don't associate with subtlety. It's like he's bashing you over the head with subtlety. Like every song is so rich and nuanced and fine with all these little details that all these little moments that could have been something badass, but instead are just something good. It's an amazing listen. Okay, so now that I've given enough promotion to a YouTuber who I don't know, he's got a lot of, I think he has almost, whatever it is, subscribe to him too. Jesus. To me, like that, those videos are like what this channel, what this platform could be. You know, when I talk about YouTube being the future of the highest forms of discourse, that's what I mean. Anyways, let's get to this album, Robots Playing into Heaven. The title obviously fascinates me. What? Robots playing into heaven? So is it robots playing a song while going into heaven? Is it a sketch of robots playing? Is there a song called Into Heaven and the robots are playing that song? Is it kind of a thought experiment? It's an oddly agrammatical. It's actually the whole thing I've been talking about. It's like restraint and a rug pull. Even the title, Robots Playing into Heaven, does not quite make sense as a concept. The words all make sense individually, but put together in a sentence, you don't really know what he means. I cannot emphasize how much you must listen to this album on headphones. It doesn't mean you have to only listen to it on headphones. I listened to it this morning so basically I do a lot of my work, like I do a lot of lesson planning in this sort of pit where my baby hangs out. And I listen to music in that pit. And I work on my computer and play with the baby. We have a little Grover toy. I play Grover with her. And I had this playing on in the background. It still works great. It's still great. It's got a great flow. It's not a bad kitchen album. But wow, when you put headphones on, does it really come alive? Before I get to my stamp, I just want to pitch. If you don't know, there's a different electronic singer artist in England named On Man, O-N space M-A-N. If you haven't listened to his last album, it's amazing. I think if you like James Blake, you would like that. Just please, if you're like a James Blake super fan and you're watching this, even though you just want to listen to the album, that's all you want, just please give it a shot because it is like awesome music. That gives me a lot of the similar feelings that James Blake does. I don't think he's trying to sound like him, but it feels very much in a similar sort of spirit. Okay, let's get to the stamp of the album, the example song. Again, the banana may be going. I don't know. So let's click above the banana if you haven't for the first time or the last time with the track Tell Me. Oh my God. When I first listened to this album, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to review it. I don't know if I'm going to review it. Oh my God, I was so in when I heard. There's a word that I have invented. It's called sketchy. And it's a way I use to describe certain electronic sounds, which are not sketchy, but like they feel like sometimes like you feel jittery, but there's kind of like a jagged jitteriness, like a powerful jitteriness. I think that's what I think of sketchy. And this automated synthesizer loop. It's just such a weird sound. This is what I'm talking about. It's a wonky banger. Okay, I'm not speaking Huttese. It's a wonky banger, Chewbacca. No, I'm saying it's a wonky banger. Okay. You can also name your band Wonky Banker. I give that to you as well. And what's great is that he has this super sketchy sound of this ridiculous synth loop that I'm having a hard time finishing this video because I want to listen to it more. But then just his gorgeous voice serves as, it's like counterpoint. It's almost against the skitchiness because his voice is so clean and high and clear, but it goes with it as well. It's hard to describe. A lot of James Blake's music is really hard to describe, which is a real compliment to James Blake's music. I will say that the lyrics are secondary to melody. The melody is secondary to the timbre of his voice. The timbre of his voice is secondary to atmosphere. Okay, so his voice is an instrument, I feel, a lot more than a way of conveying information, at least on this album. Last album, I thought less so, but that's okay. Tell me if it's worth waking up for when there are so many reasons to lie. Okay, fine. It's kind of a haunting lyrics, but I didn't pick them up the first 10 times. I had to read Lyric Genius to find it, and that's where I found it. And then eventually this like tight shuffling beat comes in. These kind of like ticky snares, and it gets into like a club banger mode, where like if the whole song was like this, you could just have like, what is love? You could have no problem with that. But then you still got that sketchy synth. It's like a broken alarm clock. Okay, it's like you wake up in the morning and the alarm's like, and then you smash it super hard, and then it's like, and then we get to this bridge. There we go. Thank you, Timba on Toast, for your excellent art, documentary, ability to categorize things, and videos. I'm not going to call it content because you described it so well. This is the rug pull. You expect some kind of thing to happen, and then instead you have what I think of as a deprived reprieve, where there's like a little break from that, from the broken alarm clock. And then the voice is so clear, and there's like this childish piano underneath. And it gets even more spare, like a little keyboard. His voice is just so weird over this little simple electronic piano sound. It's weird, but it's also not. And then the sub bass shows up to make the sound that will eventually be matched with the sketchy synth sounds. And then comes back and ends with this like beautiful echo, and this bass plays this resolving melody. One more time back again with the skitch, and then just a straight house beat to the end. Jagged snares announce like almost like a full Boots and Cats ending. And these lyrics tell me that you love me. I'm feeling so low, high, low, high, low. I'm feeling so lonely. It really feels it. Now, I have read the lighting in my study, in my salon, is so freaking intense right now. So I apologize for that. It's like, maybe I'll just move more this way. Maybe. Start the Warhol erasure. He said that I knew I had this transcendent wave vibe about it, and I felt like a perfect one for the record. So that's cool. He gets it. He knows why it's amazing, because it has this transcendent wave vibe. I'm going to go through the rest of the album much quicker, starting off with the track Asking to Break. The voice is really sweet but broken. There's something about the production on here where it's like he's destroying something beautiful. It's like cracked up piano, a tinny drum machine. It's almost like a lullaby. Sort of Radiohead-ish vibes, or probably Aphex Twin, more like it, inspired Radiohead. Voice comes in like very clear. It's like undercut by like the cracked sample of his own voice. And there's this break with like a thunder sound and like a rain sound, and then these tinkling keyboards are falling like rain, and then it gets upbeat and it's like a snap beat, and it almost sounds like the #1 dance hit Dangerous Nights, and there's no lyrics, and then like this original part gets layered in that was there in the beginning. I mean, there are lyrics, but I can't pick them up. And then it ends up just being genuinely moving. Like the whole thing together is genuinely moving. And then the second track is almost as good as the first. It's loading, sweet compressed sounds, kind of leading up to a voice. I guess it's just his voice pitched up. It sounds so feminine. I thought it was a woman the first time I heard it. I've been having that problem a lot lately. Kind of just sets these things up. Kind of a simple house beat underneath. Where are my wings? Loading. It's into this whole theme of heaven and technology. Is this a super well thought out theological meditation on technology? Probably not. Probably these are just kind of themes that sound cool and sound neat, and kind of, I doubt there's some kind of like developed super deep mythology to this album. Beautiful lyrics here. Wherever I go is only as good as my mind. It's It's very Cartesian, actually, much like Descartes. Great kind of stabbing bridge and multiverse outro. I forgot to turn off the sound on my computer, which is where I keep my notes. I don't have a teleprompter. I just have notes. And if you ever see that, that's me. That's me doing this right there. Okay, then we get to the stamp. Tell me, I regret doing that. That was not funny. That was not worth your time. I apologize. And then the track Fall Back. And then here it's just using his own voice, saying the words fall back, like the words become like percussion, otherworldly sounds, almost like a horse gallop rhythm happening here. Everything's so muffled. This is that whole thing, that whole subtlety here, until a house beat comes in, just more atmosphere, just this fall back, fall back. It just becomes like this whole percussion feel. And maybe that's the thing, maybe if you don't have like a super insistence on building everything around a standard drum beat, then you could do more things interestingly. He's Been So Wonderful is where I ask the most cynical question I can ask. At times, he seems like he might be doing stylistic exercises as opposed to like making art. In this case, I don't know, like he's mixing together what sounds like a metronome that's just counting to 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, with like these claps, and then there's gospel. And it's sort of a refigured, He's Really Been Wonderful, I assume is a song about Christ, and the gospel samples. And based on that video that I watched by Timba on Toast, he's been doing, old African-American samples for a long time, right? So I'm not saying, he's copying Father Stretch My Hand. But gospel music, I don't know. It's fine. It's a good song. It's so well made, especially these kind of like distorted synthesizers that are there. And then the way things sort of unexpectedly end in this weird gospel sound of just that he extends electronically and then has sort of this discordant sounds over it that goes against the beauty and the harmony of and then snaps back into some kind of sub-bass beat. And then it ends with Amen. That's my biggest problem with this song, is it ends with Amen. But hey, I don't know what this album's about. So if you want to tell me in the comments the ways that I'm misinterpreting it, like is this supposed to be like, this is robot gospel, this is gospel for robots, and if robots want to get into heaven, this is the kind of song they sing, and that's why it's so broken up and jagged. I actually like that idea. Screw it. That's my new interpretation of this song. The next track is called Big Hammer, and for some reason, the sounds in the beginning and the title made me think of when you get a hammer in the video game Donkey Kong, and you start going crazy. Anyways, that's kind of what I thought. Nice little... This song sort of makes me think of like a song from the 70s that's trying to sound like what the future will sound, the way the synthesizers are. This has, I guess, one of those ragamuffin flips where you take someone who's singing some reggae? No. Reggae? Yes. I always pronounce reggae. Yes, reggae. It's not reggae, it's reggae. Taking some reggae sounds and sort of flipping them in. There should be a drop in here. There's a perfect space for a drop, but as always, he is a producer of restraint, which is why, hey, 80% of you who like James Blake, like if you're a big James Blake fan, like you just deserve props, because like you're really into an artist who is very withholding, like who is artistically withholding from you, who knows what the sweetie sweet num-nums are. James Blake can give you the sweetie sweet num-nums, but instead he gives you something that's not quite as sweet as you were expecting, but has a sort of depth to the taste. It was my birthday yesterday, and every year for my birthday, my wife makes me grape nut pudding, which you've never had it. It's really good. And part of the reason that we both like it is that it's not that sweet of a dessert. It's great. It's sweet. It's still a dessert, but there's like this complexity to the texture and to the taste. And it's not the same thing as like, a banana pudding or vanilla pudding. It's a kind of like very rich, wonderful taste. Please tell me in the comments if you've ever had grape nut pudding. If you haven't, you owe it to yourself. New England does not produce the greatest culture gastronomically, but that is one of the great things they gave to the world. And then just at a certain point, like the voices in the back and the synthesizers, there's kind of a delirious quality to the song. I want you to know it's like sort of simplified sounds. And here's where his secret weapon, which is his voice, kind of comes back. And there's this like really gorgeous part with this pitched up voice that comes into this sort of like uncanny melody. I guess the term uncanny I use a lot on this channel. I talk about it a lot because I think it's important. Freud described it as unheimlich, which means unhomelike, which was a way of describing things where it looks like your house, but it's not your house. And when you feel like you know something is familiar, but something is off, it creates that feeling in you, right? That's the uncanny. And this album is often uncanny. People who deal with restraint, people who deal with withholding, subverting expectations, rug pulling, all those things can lead to an uncanny feeling. And there's something about this weird, crunchy, like it's the same melody, but it's pitched up higher, and it almost sounds like a keyboard. There's some kind of ethereal quality to it. The great thing about the uncanny is that it can become transcendent, because if you can't describe something, then all of a sudden you are in the world of transcendence. So, like grape nut pudding. It has that transcendent quality. There's something about it you can't describe. It's almost like a Gregorian chant at a certain point for like a couple seconds in here. It's another thing Timba on Toast talks about, that James Blake will just throw things in. You're like, did something happen? I'll have to listen to it again. The next song is named after what people say to me when they leave me for the evening. Night Skye, kind of tinkling sounds, not too much here. This is sort of like this middle part of the album. I sort of feels like the fabric of the album. It's sort of like the midsection that's not supposed to be too high or too low, just sort of like staying in the atmosphere. And then we get to a track like Fire the Editor, where really he's turning up his soul, because that's the thing. And I was actually in contact with one of the producers of On Soul, or the person who runs the label of On Soul. He said he was the guy who convinced James Blake to start singing, which is like great and also terrible, because he was so great when he wasn't singing, at least according to Timba on Toast, and now he's so great that he does sing, so who knows. But he just has this beautiful, high, soulful voice, which is really underused on the album. I'm going to be obnoxious, I'm going to be clever. It's underused to maximum effect. If I edited my videos, I'd have the the guy like, I'm talking about, the video, the little gif of everyone going crazy because someone just said something. It's underused to maximum effect. That's what I'd say with this voice. I thought the song was The Editor Was God. He says it's about yourself and self-censorship. That makes sense. This is a beautiful lyric. He is trying to save me from failure, but I've already failed. And he's talking about himself as the editor. So his editor is trying to save him from failure, but he's already failed. And maybe he's failed because he's trying to listen to the editor. I don't know. And then, hey, there's guitar. Why is there guitar? I don't know. Has there been guitar anywhere else on the album? I've listened to this album, 5 or 6 times? Most likely you've listened to it more. What's up? And then one of the best points of the whole album is this like ridiculously melodic, low synthesizer solo. Like, I'm calling it a solo because it's not like a melody that's repeated, but it's done so slowly that you could easily imitate it, but the notes are chosen so well and played so well. Daft Punk's gone, right? So the whole like what if we could use electronic and robotic music to reach the maximum human emotion? And that's what Daft Punk figured out how to do. That's what James Blake is doing here. If you can hear me, a song with piano and a stand-up bass loop, a little hiss to indicate authenticity. And this song is like doesn't have a place on the album in a way. It's like just for his voice, and he's talking to his father, and he's thinking about what his father did well and what his father did poorly. It's an interesting sort of generational song, which sort of reminds me of 21 Pilots, the way they sing about their parents. There. I've officially done something you did not expect me to do. Compare James Blake to 21 Pilots. And then just his voice is at the end, and this is nice because the whole album had a kind of feel, and then we have this song which is a little bit out of place, and then Playing Robots into Heaven is sort of like the opposite. So where the previous song, If You Can Hear Me, is like basically just voice. Playing Robots into Heaven is basically just organ. And I'm pretty sure that it's just an organ, not like a organ that is played on a keyboard. I think this is actually an actual church organ. And you don't know this unless you've seen an organ. The organist at my local church, I went to church for like a couple of years, 70% to hear the organ and like 30% to hear about Jeebus. The organist was just so good. Sometimes organ, especially the high notes, when you play them, they sound electronic. They sound fake. They don't sound real. And this is the title track, Playing Robots into Heaven. Now, the weird thing is, and you'd think I'm making this up because it's too perfect, but I happened to be watching, I was at the gym, as I like to do 3 times a week. That's why I started doing 3 videos a week. I was watching Futurama. So I switched between Sex and the City and Futurama. I watched Sex and the City to better understand the women in my life and because the show is awesome, shut up. And I watched Futurama because I enjoy Futurama and it's predictable that I would like it. But the episode I happened to watch was all about robosexuality and about how the church intervened. And there's this pastor, I think it's called like Pastor Bot or something like that, who's there, only believe in the lies that you read in the Bible, all this kind of funny stuff here. But then it reminded me of the sort of very rich church of robotology that's in Futurama. And really that's the most I've ever really think about, that I can think about, of the afterlife for robots. So I don't know. Is he just messing around? He says that he was on Twitter, I don't know, Instagram or something, and the phrase, the organist that plays robots into heaven, is what came to mind because that's what it sounded like for me. So I think he's saying that. So I now think that playing robots into heaven, I now think we have an answer. That he is an organist who is playing an organ, and there are actual robots, little benders and tweakies, going up an escalator into heaven. And this is the sound. Death is a big deal to you, flesh bags. That's what Bender the Robot says in that Futurama episode, because he says, unless you haven't noted, I'm a robot. So, robots don't die. So having heaven for a robot is quite interesting as well. It implies that robots have a soul, all that stuff. So it's sort of actually just really exactly in the same lane as Daft Punk, with like, they're robots, but they're people, human after all. But I didn't notice that till right now. So I'm not being like provocative, okay? I'm not trying to say like, oh, he's just ripping off that. It's a theme that makes sense when we're having human beings who are making music that people associate with robotics. So these are my Patreons. They give me money so I can buy music. I think I need to buy the rest of James Blake's catalog. He has proven to me, for whatever that's worth, dunderheaded ninny muggins, though I may be, has proven to me that he is a great artist who I need to take super seriously. And I need to start treating every release of his, I need to circle it on the calendar and say, oh my God, James Blunt is releasing a new album. I on Patreon as well, I sometimes say, hey, do you want a shout out? So these are people who are my Patreons. I don't know if they give $3 or $5 or $10. I don't care. They all get a shout out. Reagan says, yes, with 4 S's. Favorite album of the decade so far. He's really a focus zone here, that UK dubstep dance vibe, and he just does it so perfectly. Agreed, Reagan. Jack McConnell, I'd never gotten a shout out before, but I like James Blake enough to be on this one. You got it, Jack. You got it, Jake. You got it, Jack. Andrew Thompson, incredible artist. He has it all. I loved his live set when he opened for Kendrick in Dublin. He opened for Kendrick in Dublin. James Blake opened for Kendrick. I know he wrote a song for Kendrick. Goddamn. Isn't music awesome? Isn't it great? Isn't it great that we live in a world where that happened and that's something that can be appreciated? It's great. Jared Peterson wants a shout out. I love what I've heard of James' stuff, and this has excited me the most of his past few projects. And Max Polino says yes with only 2 S's. So Reagan has 4 S's. Max, you have 2 S's. You need to up it on the S game by at least 3. Could I get a shout out? James Blake is one of my favorites ever with 2 exclamation points. Well, Reagan didn't have any exclamation points. So, hey, Reagan. It's the 21st century. We need exclamation points. All right. Until next time, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. Oh, I forgot to say the thing. If you type in AVAA, I'll give you a heart on any comment. That's my little permission structure for you to comment. The algorithm's getting used to me again. So if you like it, then like it. Please like it. And until next time, there's the robots.